Hi, poet. Welcome to Low Effort Poetry School, where you can watch bad videos about how to write good poems. My name is Catherine, and I'm a poet too. Okay, I have bad news and I have good news. The bad news is there is really only one foolproof path to getting better at writing poems, and that's writing a lot of them. This will take time, weeks, months, years. You know that thing about how it takes 10,000 hours to perfect a skill? Yeah, that is what I'm talking about. But you didn't click this video to have the secret to getting people to love your poems be write for a decade, and through the drudgery of hard work you shall make boring incremental progress. No, you want secrets. So that's the good news. I'm going to tell you the secrets. The underlying secret is this. A lot of contemporary poems follow certain conventions, and if you know these conventions, you can follow them, and you won't reveal yourself to be so obviously new to writing poetry. Huge note here, though, not all poets writing today follow these rules in all their poems. In fact, some of the greatest poets writing today break them. One of the differences is they did the 10,000 hours thing already, so they have the skill to break these conventions skillfully. They also break conventions for a reason, and the reason is usually not, I just like the way it sounds, or because you think that's how all poetry is always written. So if you insist on breaking these conventions, I encourage you to think about why you're breaking them, and maybe try it my way just to see what happens. Rhyme. First of all, don't give your poem end rhyme. End rhyme is when the last syllables of a verse rhyme, thus creating a sing-song rhythm to your poem. End rhyme can give a poem a momentum, but man, is it the kiss of death for sounding old-fashioned and making it seem like you haven't read any contemporary poets. Most contemporary poets don't make use of end rhyme, and if they do, it's in one poem out of many, and is only one of many elements in their poetic toolkit. It's more common to play with sounds within the line if you're really attached to rhyme, but that's a much subtler effect than hickory-dickory-dock, the mouse ran up the clock. You don't want to be the end rhyme pervert at the open mic, marching up there every week to gleefully inflict your doggerel verse on a tired, bored audience, praying that you'll finally surprise them with something other than end rhyme. Next up, we have fixed form. All poetry has form, but some poems are more formal than others. What do I mean by this? Form is simply the shape or structure of the words in a poem. The form of a poem obviously affects how it looks laid out on the page. Some poems are fixed forms. This is also sometimes called closed or received forms, which means they'll have a set number of lines or stanzas or set meter or set rhyme scheme. Basically, it means they have rules. These fixed forms have names you may have heard like sonnet, sestina, villanelle, or pantoum. You can look up how to write a fixed form, follow the rules, and write one if you want. Contemporary poets do write fixed forms, but they also write a lot of free verse, which doesn't follow any set of rules. A mistake I see new poets make sometimes is to get hung up on a particular form, like writing a bunch of villanelles and getting frustrated when it's hard or you're not getting the results you're hoping for. Fixed form is a matchmaking exercise. You want there to be a connection between the form and the content. So do some research, or at least some good critical thinking, about what a particular form might be good for. For example, sestinas are a fixed form in which 6 words are repeated at the ends of lines in a particular pattern over the course of a bunch of stanzas. The repetition and circling back can create a sense of obsession, circularity, or spiraling. You'll be more likely to write a successful sestina if the topic you're writing about makes sense for its strengths as a form. The other thing to know about how contemporary poets used fixed form is they love to break form rules. So once you've written a couple of haibun, for example, you can try bending or breaking the rules of the form to see what happens. You can also add rules to an existing fixed form or make up your own fixed form from scratch. Line. One of the things to look for in a poem's form, and this time I do mean the poem's shape on the page, is what the lines are doing. By the way, even prose poems have form. Prose poems are poems in which there are no line breaks, and it might look like prose, but it's really just a poem with one infinitely long line. Anyway, line breaks happen at intentional spots in the poem. A poet put them there to create an effect, to draw attention to the space between words that might be collapsed without a line break. Sometimes poems are composed in a way where line breaks are added in the editing process. It can be a struggle to figure out what to do with your line breaks from scratch. Here's my hackiest secret that has gotten me actually kind of a long way. When in doubt, try couplets. Couplets are stanzas with 2 lines. Stanzas, for the uninitiated, are like the paragraphs in a poem. So you can try to arrange your poem in such a way that each stanza has 2 lines. Remember that line breaks don't have to end in a period or comma, although they can. I have found that couplets are a good place to start because they create many opportunities for discovering intention. Basically, the stuff that makes you look smart because you noticed a pattern in the editing process and leaned in. Experiment with couplets that have shorter or longer lines, or mix and match. See where that gets you. Personally, I'm a sucker for couplets with long lines. I don't know why. I just think they're neat. Capitalization and punctuation. We're getting into the nitty-gritty now. You can make all kinds of choices about capitalization and punctuation in your poetry. The most important thing is to stay consistent and intentional within each poem. It's okay to use one convention in a poem and then switch it up in a different poem. That's totally allowed. However, one style you might want to rethink is starting each new line with a capital letter, even when it's not the start of a new sentence. For whatever reason, that's not as common in contemporary poetry as it used to be, and is sometimes a tell that a poet is new to writing. When in doubt, capitalize and punctuate as though you're writing normal prose, slap that masterpiece into couplets, and let the riches roll in. Just kidding, there's no money here. Alignment. Similar to starting every new line with a capital letter is the dreaded center alignment. Beyond being outdated, center alignments are actually harder on the eye for a reader because your eye is not returning to the same left-aligned y-axis on the page at each new line. Sure, some poems make your eye wander all over the page, but they're doing it for a reason, hopefully. Center-aligned poems are an example of making your reader do extra work in a bad, annoying way for no reward. Plus, it's mostly out of fashion with poetry editors. As with everything, you can break this rule if you want, and have what you think is a good reason, but don't say I didn't warn you. Voice. Write like you talk. Poems can be just made up of sentences. You're totally allowed to be casual in a poem, and in fact, it's basically preferable to write the way you speak rather than trying to sound like a poet. Poetic voice can be a nebulous topic, but it's much better to sound like you than to try to sound like a caricature of Robert Frost or Emily Dickinson. The value you add to poetry comes from you being you, and then editing that you into an ultra-distilled, polished, and intentional you that will be engaging for a reader. We already have Robert Frost and Emily Dickinson's poems. Give us something that's yours alone. So that's my video on how to fake it till you make it as a poet. If you want to, please like and subscribe, and leave me a comment about what else you'd like to see me cover on my channel. Thanks for watching.
It's blowing, gonna be massive. Sorry, Grandma, ate my acid. Do not eat the grandma meat. It's a wet, wet heat at Dante's Peak. Papa.